Hello, guys. Welcome back to our weekly Fast Track Money session. And we took a little bit break, but if you are here watching this session, I'm so happy that you stick with us. Some of you might join from Facebook, some of you might join from, I think this time around, we might have visitors from LinkedIn, and some of you might join from YouTube Live. And as usual, if this is your first time, I'm Yasi. I'm the creator behind Fast Track. So we have a podcast, we have a website called fasttrack.live. There you can read articles about personal finance, money, and entrepreneurship, as well as recorded with all the guests. With me is my co-host, Matthias Richter. So Matthias Richter is also called Financial Imagineer. So his website is financial-imagineer.com. He used to be a banker, achieved financial independence when he was before 37 years old. And here he shares his personal ideas and tips and tricks helping you to imagine your life financially. And then today we have a very special guest, which you might already have seen from the social media post. That is a millennial expert, Vivek, and he will be joining us shortly. But to start with this session, I want to ask the following guests, or if you're watching this, a question. Who from you are millennials? Please type I or give us a heads up in the chat section. It will be interesting to see how many of you guys here are born in the 80s. I think millennials is 80s to like 90s.
Millennials start around 84, I think, and then up to the year 2000, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Matthias, are you a millennial?
I am not a millennial. I am so-called Generation X, which is, but I'm in the last couple of years, so maybe 5 years before millennial generation started. And therefore, the funny thing there is actually there's a special expression for people like myself, Xennial. There has been like a generation in between the Xennials, which is just between Generation X and Millennials. So I think I'm not so much into labeling people in that sense, right? But I think everyone has their own fate in their hands. That's what I believe in. But it's very interesting to have these groups because the groups show you that kind of similar people at similar age to have similar issues. So for the millennials, when we have looked at what's going on, the millennials, they have been hit like 2 times now by a recession. Number one was the big financial crisis. Most millennials were in their 20s when that happened, just started their job. And then the great financial crisis happens. And now last year we had the COVID crash and everything around that. And therefore, if you look at millennials financially, that's why what we are talking about today as well, it looks like they are actually worse off than the generations that came before them. So you have like millennials now have lower salaries even than my generation and the baby boomers before that. Millennials do have lower net worth compared to the generations before at the same age. And it just looks like they have it a little harder. At the same time, millennials are the most educated in average generation that we have ever seen on this planet. So, and also I think with the internet at our fingertips, they are the most blessed. They have most options available so far that you ever could have had in human life, right? So it's actually quite exciting. Very, very well educated, ready to do whatever. The world is global, connected in a way. You could do whatever you want. However, lagging from a financial point of view, unfortunately.
Yeah, and on top of that, what we already have described, I'm going to introduce the millennial expert coming into our studio. That is Vivek, Iyyani, and let me pull him.
Hi.
Hello. And if you
Hello.
if this is your first time seeing Vivek, he is actually a millennial specialist expert, and recently he has published a book called Engaging Millennials. He often gives coaching sessions, workshops in companies, helping corporates to understand millennials, understand their mindset, and helping them retain millennial employees. So today he is the best guest that we can ever have to talk about millennial mindset. And earlier on, me and Matt discussed about the millennial generation, and he also mentioned some of the typical traits shared by millennials. Maybe you can give us a comment to define exactly who is defined as millennial and what kind of common traits they have.
Yeah, sure. So, of course, millennials is when we talk about generations, it's always a social concept. So, when it's a social concept, you won't have a fixed number to the years that you have, right? So, there will be different definitions if you actually Google online about millennials, Gen X, baby boomers, right? So, what we can understand, right, of the different generations is 1946 to 1964 is the baby boomers. Then 1965 to 1979 is what we call the Gen X. And rightly, as Matt mentioned, 1979 to 1984 is the Xennials, the people who kind of resonate with the Gen X and also resonate with the millennials, a bit of this and a bit of that, right? So that's like a very micro generation that the researchers have actually put out, that's come up very recently. And we also have the millennials 1984 to 1995, some say 2000, and then we have, so 1995 to 2010 is Gen Z, right? And that's the youngest generation that's entering the workforce at the moment right now. So if you are looking at the characteristics of millennials, I think we can all agree that they love to travel. They are highly educated. They come with a lot of influence as a demographic group, because they're large in numbers, right? Because they are the children of the baby boomers, and the baby boomers basically, after World War II, there was a baby boom. That's why they're called the baby boomers. So millennials are children of baby boomers. So they also have got a lot of tech savviness. So they are very fast on their phones. They've been in that entire tech revolution, they've been growing up during that time. So you would see that millennials are constantly on their phones, right? You can leave your home without your wallet, but you can't leave your home without your phone, right? So these are some of the key characteristics that we can see from millennial. When you look from the outside, right, they're always on their phones. They love to be on social media. They love to travel. And they're pretty much in that space at this point in time. So yeah.
So, Matt, which generation are you in?
Yeah, that's exactly. I'm happy Vivek just confirmed. I'm somewhere in between, I feel. And that's probably why we have this Xennial kind of description at all. I feel a little bit part of both. And so I have been growing up with less tech and then increasingly more tech. When I was a kid, there was no cell phones, right? I remember my dad used to have a phone that actually was as big as a suitcase, and it's like it used to be called a car phone, for a matter, right? Because you needed to plug it somewhere, and then, of course, over time, the things improved. My first cell phone was an Alcatel with an antenna that you pull out, right? And then suddenly the internet came. You had a WAP. You had certain things there, functionality. So I grew up with all that. That was quite cool to see this whole kind of switch into a new world, right? Also, when I was a 20-year-old, Amazon started to get active. And back then, we were talking about the new economy and everything. And maybe, yes, I also invested in that. And it was nowhere close to, how to say, we couldn't imagine how quick it will happen. Somehow the whole transition from offline to online, but it's not over yet. It's still pushing into the same direction. So I'm a little bit of both in a way. The old world, I have seen it, but the new world, I understand it. And I'm very curious how this is going to continue. And today we talk about millennial mindset. So the interesting thing now is how would you say, Vivek, maybe somebody that is a millennial has a different mindset or the brain structure? How is this different from maybe a Gen X? Like, how would you put a
Brain
different
structure,
yeah, for me and somebody after me, right? That would be
me,
very
I'm after you.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we have got some millennials present as well. So Actually, I think the brain structure wouldn't be too different if you were to actually dissect it. But I would actually like to see if there's anyone who can do that. But I do feel that there have been certain trends that have been happening, along the way, that has actually shaped the mindset of the young generation. So let me explain, right? So there has been definitely the first thing you will notice is the parenting styles actually shifted quite a bit for the baby boomers when millennials were growing up. So the baby boomers, if you ask your grandparents, or you ask your parents, how did your grandparents actually parent them, right? Your own parents, you would actually hear that they were more authoritative. They were more of a strict personality when it comes to and they are not so friendly, right? So it's like a top down approach. I think, Yasi, you would agree with me, especially in Asia, right, that it's a very hierarchical kind of a conversation. So if you actually wanted to maybe go on a school trip, you go through your mom, and then your mom will convey the request to your dad, and then your dad would say yes or no, right? And then after that, that's how the baby boomers actually, that's how they experienced the parenting, and they realized that this the only way. And when they became parents, they actually said, I wanted to provide a better world for my children, right? And what happened is that the baby boomers then started to treat their children more friendlier. They were much more like a peer, right? And they would actually want to engage with their children and not have that parent and child divide, but rather to close up that divide and make it, there's still a line that you cannot cross, but they are still a lot more like a mentor, right? They are a lot more like this. And this is the expectation that millennials bring to the workplace as well, right? If your parents are a certain type, you expect your bosses to be a certain type. So when baby boomers actually entered the workforce, right, they expected their bosses to be almost similar to how their parents were, and millennials today expect the same in the workplace. So you see the social in the social trends, we've seen that parenting has actually shifted a lot in terms of the mindset of what millennials have about the workplace, about the bosses that they are going to be dealing with. We've also seen that financially there has been, like you mentioned earlier on, different recessions that millennials have been living through, and that has actually impacted their decisions as well, right? For example, if they've noticed that their parents who have been loyal in an organization for 10, 20 years, right, get retrenched because of a recession, they realize that at the end of the day, the companies can just let go of you in a minute, right? So no matter how loyal you are, there's no guarantee of a full-time employment for the rest of your life, right? You can be loyal for 30 years, but if they feel that you're redundant, and they'll let you go. So that also shifted their mindset to think that, hey, I got to be loyal to myself, right? Because if there's a bad time, they're going to let me go, then I'll be the one who's left without things, right? So sociologically, financially, and of course technology has been another trend that we have to look into. Technology has been growing so fast, and millennials are touted to be the digital natives, the ones who really understand technology, and they are very intuitive when it comes to technology. They're always experimenting with it, so they're really moving fast. In fact, our phones have shifted every 2 to 3 years, right? And that's the kind of expectations that they have about promotions as well. That's upgrade cycle. Am I upgrading every few years, right? If I'm not upgrading, that means I'm in a standstill, I'm not really moving well. And they kind of compare their consumer cycle to their personal development, right, or their professional development. So these are all the things that they even have a consumer mindset when it comes to applying for jobs. So last time it's like, please give me a job, right? I'm just waiting to get a job. And today is like, I've applied here, I can apply here, I can apply here, I can apply here. Which one should I apply to? There are so many options. And it's not just jobs, right? Because I think we're going to talk about this later on as well. It's not jobs, it's actually different sources of income, right? Millennials are not just looking for one source of income, which they realize can be jeopardized if the economy is not doing well. But if I have multiple sources, then I am in a much better place. And I think you guys are the experts in that area, so I've got a lot to learn from you as well.
I like what you said that the millennials now they are not loyal to the employer; they're loyal to themselves. And also, I think something around this line you mentioned that their progression in life also in line with their progression in consumption? Do you mean by like buying houses, buying cars, or what do you mean by progression in
Consumer
consumption?
products. Right,
Consumer
buying
products.
cars and houses don't happen every few years, but if they were affordable, maybe we could have done that. But like your phone, your smartphones, if you actually see your friends, right, do they actually change their phones every few years when a new model comes out? Right, are they
Yeah.
looking to get the latest trends? Right, and they
Mm.
are using that as yardstick to compare their lifestyle as well. I've changed more phones than I've changed jobs. That's something that they they compare. We do this subconsciously, right? And even on social media, we are always looking at what's happening on the other side, what's happening in other people's lives, right? And we are comparing and we are making judgments. So if the person from your same batch, university batch, is doing better than you, it
Mm.
affects you, right? And it makes you want to do better than what you've been achieving so far. So all of these actually play an important role in the mindset that millennials have today.
I want to touch on the phone. It's very interesting because I was told, so the person who told me this, you're watching this video, I was told, I used the phone for 2 years. Now it's time to get a new phone. So Matthias,
Yeah.
can you tell us about the phone you are using?
Oh well, I was very very long a guy that resisted to get into iPhones. I was on a very very old phone, and they called it the brick. They said you have still a brick. And the first iPhone I had was an iPhone 4, and then I kind of held back, and eventually I upgraded to another iPhone, and now I have an iPhone 11. Which I am very happy, but I think I bought it because of I need it as the camera for this video. So this is actually an iPhone camera here, very good quality.
Wow.
And the other thing that clicks in my head automatically when I hear what Vivek was explaining is lifestyle inflation in a way, right? You feel like you have to be current, you have to be updated, you have to be part of that, and you have to keep up with the Joneses, which is probably also one of the reasons why financially some of the people are not as well off as it used to be before, right? So it's like you are part of this group. Social media makes it very very easy for people to fall trap to that, because you want to be someone, you want to also catch up and show that you've made it or whatever. It's like usually I say social media is like the highlight reel of your life. It's not reality, right? And therefore, if everyone around you is doing that, you also want to be part of that. And I use an iPhone 11 at the moment, but I'm not gonna, switch that just because the 12 now is out or the next one is out and the next one is out. I'm gonna use it until I feel it's at the end of its lifetime. Before that, I had an iPhone 6, which I even went to upgrade my battery until I really couldn't. Actually, in the end, it was like you pick the phone and after 5 minutes, the battery is dead. That was the moment when I upgraded.
Talking about the
Wonderful.
phone, I have also along the line of the consumer goods consumption. I think it's so interesting because Vivek is in Singapore and I used to live in Singapore. So Matthias, you also used to live in Singapore. And then in big cities, and when you go to office, you are expected to dress certain ways, right? And then if you dress differently, you don't earn kind of like a first impression from your colleagues or from the business partners. I think plus all the social media is that in real life plus virtual life, you are pressured to keep up with the Joneses.
Yes. I mean, Singapore, I remember one thing was, what watch are you wearing? If you're a banker, you have to have an expensive watch. You have to be someone. And I have seen people spending $10,000 on a watch just to, be part of that group. But the $10,000 could have been put into ETFs. That I was like dying inside, but it's part of life, right? Or
unless you get this special edition or the rare ones that you have to queue to get one from Rolex shop, then you get it right. You sell it on second market, it's already make a profit. So it depends.
Yeah,
I get
it
your
depends.
point. Yeah.
another thing was cars, right? You have to have a good car. And then I figured at the end, oh, well, I never had a car there. And I feel like, okay, if you don't have a car, at least you're not doing something wrong, right? And the COE at the beginning when I was there was close to $100,000. COE is a certificate of entitlement for the people that are not in Singapore. So you have to put 100,000 almost down back then. Now it's a little less, because Singapore constrains the numbers of cars that are allowed in the city. And this 100,000 price tag is depreciating because it's only valid for 10 years. At the end of the 10 years, the residual value will be zero donut. So it's all gone. And then if you divide it by 10, you have 10K per year that you just write off. And you haven't even bought a car yet, no insurance, no fuel, no road taxes, no nothing. And then I divided that 10,000 per year by 300 something days, and I ended up with close to a $30 taxi budget, which at the end I didn't even use up. And I say, okay, I can take the taxi whenever I want. I felt even more luxurious. I had a driver, and I didn't have to bother about fixing the car, where to put it, and all the other things. So there are certain things. Well, now that's a very, very Singapore specific situation, but I think that's also something. People sometimes bought cars there and they only used it one day a week on Sunday to drive out the family. The rest of the week, they wouldn't drive the car to work. So the car was depreciating in the garage for like 6 days a week.
Yeah, in Singapore, there's a very interesting observation that we have amongst the definition of success. So, according to our leaders in Singapore, right, the baby boomers, they wanted the 1, 2, 3, 4, right? These are the markers of success: the one spouse, 2 children, 3-room flat, and 4 wheels. That means if you have a vehicle, right, you are considered successful. Materialistically, we know that you're successful. And then in the Gen X, right, they have the 5 C's: the cash, car, credit card, country club, and condominium, right? If you have the 5 C's, you're considered very successful. But for millennials, right, they have not actually been able to pinpoint exactly what is the metric of success. And the reason for that is because millennials are looking at more experiences rather than accumulation. So it's more about the social media post that you can put out there as opposed to the item that you can buy, right? So that's what they're looking for, right? And that's it's not about the items, it's not about the assets, it's more about, is this Instagram worthy or not, right? Is this experience something that's going to give me a lot more attention or not, right? So the millennials have a very different, and they are more like access. I like to rent, I like to, I don't want to have a lot of things holding me down. And you also realize that the young generation today actually is slower to getting married, slower to settling down, slower to buying houses. And all of these reasons are happening because, of course, I think there are a lot more things that contribute to it. But one of it is because they've just not gotten used to the idea of settling down really early, right? They basically want more time to explore, to do things. They have this YOLO concept: you only live once. So I really want to live life to the maximum that I can while I'm single, right? And then once they're ready, they get to, then I think we are slowly moving into that phase of getting married, settling down, and having a family. So that's slowly happening, but it's actually much slower compared to the earlier generations.
Right. And it's funny because in the past, me and Matthias were talking about the horizon when people think about investing, right? Dealing with your money. And what's interesting is singles, they don't usually think long term, especially millennials. Like you said, I think about today, I enjoy my life, I travel, I get experiences, I don't think long term. And then once you start to have kids at home, then suddenly your investment horizon goes to 20 years.
Yeah.
I think that I heard it from Matthias before. And and then you talk about YOLO. What's I find is interesting because I was like living the YOLO style. I even wrote an article about it. Don't care about savings, investments, retirement. Okay, leave it for the future. Still young. But when we start to talk about personal finance and manage your own money, then I realized that, holy shit, I have to start as soon as possible because the future is relying on my actions today. So for
Yeah.
millennials, I think in terms of money mindset, is don't sacrifice too much of your personal financial future for today's pleasure. Just have pleasure, but responsibly, and
Yeah.
still knowing how much money to put aside for investment, etc.
No, I
And
think the key thing that a lot of millennials are thinking about when it comes to money is once they get their hands on money, that once they have their full-time job, right? They are actually realizing that there are some things that I can only do now that I cannot do when I'm 60 years old, 70 years old, 80 years old. So the older generation, they really, really made retirement the end goal, which is retire, work really hard, climb the corporate ladder, retire, and you can be happy for the rest of your life, right? That's the kind of narrative that used to be there. And millennials are realizing that, that may not necessarily mean I can do all the things I want to do. Like if I want to travel the world, how many countries can I go when I'm 20 in my 20s versus when I'm in my 60s, right? How many activities, how many options are available to me in terms of doing adventure sports, different kinds of things, right? In terms of health, in terms of your even in your 20s, you're even more courageous, you're even more braver to do the crazier things in life, as opposed to 60s when you've been through a lot of ups and downs and you're like a bit more safer, on the safer side. Of course there are exceptions to both sides. I've seen millennials who don't want to do any of these things, and I've also seen baby boomers who go all out in their 60s, right? So but the majority seem to see that I should be spending my time doing the best, having the best experiences with the money that I'm having. So the investment is not exactly what they are looking at immediately, because they also don't have any dependence. So when I talk to my clients who tend to be insurance agents, right, and they want to recruit the young generation, they and we are when we had this back and forth conversations, we realized that people actually only start thinking about insurance once they become once they have dependents. So either they get married or they have children, and then they start thinking, okay, if something happens to me, who's going to look after them? And this is happening at a later stage because millennials are getting married later, right? So that's why we are saying that it's not that they don't want to do it, it's just that the situation hasn't happened in their 20s, it's now just happening in their 30s, for example.
No, I think there is a huge problem with that, because everyone that is investing over time will understand the concept of compounding, right?
yes, yes.
And if you delay to take care of your future by a few years or even a decade, you miss out on all that time that you could have had if you would have started earlier. And I fully understand what you talk about with YOLO and so forth. It's like if you're a kid, you have a lot of energy, you have a lot of time, but no money. Then when you're working, you have a lot of money, you have energy, but no time. And then when you're old, maybe you don't have the energy anymore. So it's like always, it's like a trilemma. You don't really find the perfect spot, right? And for the financial independence movement, what is really, really interesting here, we have FIRE, financial independence, retire early. We have different kinds of FIRE. I have heard of lean FIRE, barista FIRE. There's all these kind of different FIRE types. Fat FIRE would be you have money in abundance, but the lean FIRE is like you just have enough to cover your bare kind of expenses, and then you can do other things. I think what the millennials really do like, when I want to summarize what I've understood, is keep options open as long as possible. Keep your optionality in life, which is a very, very good concept, so to say. And also what you mentioned, if you have more income streams to support that, you're even more free, because if you work on building more income streams, you diversify the risk. It's like funny, some people, they say you have to diversify your investments, but they don't diversify the income streams. So they are just dependent on one thing, which is your salary. And once something happens there, well, you may be diversified in everything else, but not where it matters probably the most: cash flow, free cash flow to your life, right? And that's a very interesting observation. So thank you for highlighting that.
I have two resources prepared to elaborate a little bit more what Matthias mentioned. So Matthias mentioned that actually it's the combination of what we discussed. Like the current millennial mindset is everything happens later, insurance happens later, family happens later, time horizon investment, they think about it, happens later, and then but the time doesn't come back. They 10 years later, they start 10 years later, but they're losing out the compound effect in investment. So next, I'm going to share a screen just to show the audience how this compound effect actually make a big difference if they start later. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so in this screen, actually, what we have seen that it's just an assumption based on saving 200 per month, and then per year is 2,400, and then 8% return. Because when we dig that a little bit deeper, yes, on average, you can achieve 8% return if your investment horizon is 40 years. It's not trading, it's not betting. So if some of the audience has question to that, please read Matthias' blogs and my blogs to understand it, or take our fast track money course to understand the concept. So anyway, if your time horizon is years, then you really see that even though you invested 96,000 absolute, but at the end of the 40 years, you have 621,000 because of the compound effect. And then you can see the curve, it's getting steeper and steeper. That's where the power of compound kicked in. But if you start later, you don't have 40 years to invest. If you start even later, you don't have 30 years. You have maybe 10 years. But if you see the 10 years, it's so flat. But no matter what age you start with investing or manage your money, you have to go through the flat period, and then it starts to take off. I think that's the thing we want to raise, that millennials, they think about their financial future too late, but we want to change that.
Absolutely, it's such an important thing for educators like yourself, right? To educate the young generation on why these are some must-have habits you must do, you must have to adult well, right? So we are going through that adulting process right now. You're finding your life partner, you're managing your career, you don't know whether your career is going the right way, you're earning some money but you're not spending it properly, you just want to do invest in instant gratification, right? That's one of the key things that another common trait that is very known for the young generation is, how do I get things today, right? Because technology has made life so convenient for us that our impatience levels have gone up. So it's more instant gratification kind of a mindset, right? If I do this today, what can I get tomorrow, not 10 years down the road? So having that long-term mindset, long-term thinking is actually lacking within the young generation. They are looking at what can I achieve out of this in a short period of time as opposed to a long period of time. And educating through blogs, through the videos, through these kind of interviews is actually one of the best ways to let them know early on that this is something that you need to start focusing on. And if you don't, there's no way you can go back 10 years and restart again. You're only going to be living with regret, or having some kind of difficulty, right? And you're not able to cope with those kind of things. It's like health and wealth have to go side by side. You have to maintain and manage it really well. You can't just ignore one and look after the other, even though that's what they all want to do in the 20s, right? I want to make a lot of money and then I want to spend it all.
Yeah, you mentioned about adulting. Let me show you something. A meme. Oops, you cannot see the screen, sorry. So I want to share with you, this is actually what Matthias shared earlier. Adulting, let me just say it. Adulting is putting back a pack of chicken for $11.58 because you see one for $11.17.
Yeah, kind of accurately explains it.
What I really like is when I hear that with instant versus delayed gratification. So what I like to do with my kids sometimes is, like, I'm marshmallow testing them. I don't know if you heard about the marshmallow test.
Very
so there were some
test.
studies. The study was like they bring a kid into the room and they give the kid a very nice, good looking marshmallow, sit the kid down and say, look, this is your marshmallow. I'm going to leave you alone. I have to go out quickly for 5 minutes. If I'm coming back and this marshmallow is still here, I'm going to give you a second one. And then you can see how the little kids are looking at this marshmallow. And very often they just eat it. But there are a few kids that manage to take a few steps back,
Resist.
enjoy the moment, resist, and get a second one. And I think this is something you can train that. I'm trying to train my kids with not just with marshmallows, with all kind of stuff. But I think this is something, even you're an adult, if you feel you are not patient enough, try to look at it like the marshmallow test. Try to look at yourself like this kid with the marshmallow here and 2 marshmallows there. Try to put these 2 things together, and maybe you will be able to resist longer.
Yeah, it's and longitudinally, when they go back to these people who actually resisted it, they've actually found out that they have been much better in terms of making decisions, right?
Yes,
That have been very important for their financial future, their career, their social family life. All of these decisions they've made, they've thought of the long term effects, and they've made
correct,
them very properly. Yeah.
correct.
So I think it's very interesting. We have uncovered some of the typical millennial mindset from Vivek, that we talk about, like instant gratification, everything's delayed, like forming having a family, having kids, children, and then not loyal to the company, to the job, loyal to themselves. And then the increasing consumption level, like phones and other things, and being influenced physically, people around you, your friends, your colleagues, the bankers wearing 10,000 watch, and then virtually Instagram, or I don't know, there's a social media in China called Red. Everybody seems like having a fabulous life, having fancy stuff, and then people looking for, to impress others on the internet. How can you impress others? By doing the same, showing off, fabulous vacation. These are typical millennial mindsets, and when it comes to financial future, definitely we think we need to change that. Millennial money mindset needs to be changed. So I hope you guys, you watching this session here, if you're millennials, leave us a comment. What do you think? You agree with Vivek or you don't agree with Vivek? And try the marshmallow test yourself and leave in the comment, tag Matthias Richter, hey, you did it, or you tried it out with your kids. And lastly, Vivek, do you want to tell us also, for the audience, if they want to learn more about understanding the millennial mindset, or as a company want to know how to retain millennials, where can they find you?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Of course, if you are looking to understand millennials, the first thing to do would be to get my book, Engaging Millennials. This is what it looks like. I have it here, right? Engaging Millennials, right? That would actually go dive deeper into the mindset that they have and what other companies, progressive companies, are doing today to engage with them, to retain them, to recruit them. And that's one of the key things that is, a big pain for a lot of organizations. How do I ensure that I keep attracting the young talents, and there's so much of competition in the recruitment space today. And if you want to learn more about how you as a millennial you can do well, you can also look into my other book, which is Empowering Millennials. I think I have it here, but oh yeah, here it is. Right, it's Empowering Millennials. This is the first one, and this is more about how you should do the right things, right? So prepare a roadmap for yourself, have long-term plan for your house, plan for your marriage, plan for all of these things that that's going to happen eventually, if that's what you've already had in mind, right? Start planning for it financially as well, so that not when you decided to get married and then you're like, okay, I need to start saving up for marriage, or right, you have to start now so that it will be easier for you, and less stressful for you once that time comes, right? So having that long-term mindset, and winning this game of money and understanding how money works is so important, because it will change the direction of your life, the options you have. I always say, right, the more money you have, the more options you have. And the rich people, they say this line, which is, if it's a problem that can be solved by money, it's not a problem.
That's my motto.
Right? So you must be very,
Beautiful.
very rich, yes.
No, it's just to make myself
Yeah,
less stressed in certain situations. Yeah.
exactly. So if you have money on your side, it's like a huge relief, right? So I highly recommend, you guys listen in, tune in, and learn more about money and educate yourself. That's your responsibility. No one's going to teach you after you've graduated from university about money. They don't teach about this in schools, which they should. I don't know why they still haven't. So you have to find. It's good that you guys are doing this, because it's such a requirement in today's day and age, especially for the younger generation, to learn to master the money the proper way.
Yeah. I have a call to action to the audience here. So, borrowing from Vivek's first book, if you like the concept of 3F, so the fortune, the freedom, and to have fun, if you like this concept of 3F, what you need to do is that you go to the description, show notes, you check out the Fast Track Money course, because there we are going to teach you how to use the money as a tool to empower you, achieve the fortune, achieve the freedom, and still having fun in life, right? So we are not teaching you how to get rich overnight, how to invest, pick this stock, pick that stock. We teach you the methodology and the principles that Matthias has lived through and achieved financial independence. I have lived through and changed my life. And that's why we believe that everybody needs this education. And if you're a millennial, and if what we talk about relate to you, check out all the links in the show notes. And I hope we can see you again in the next week's YouTube live session on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube.
Wow, nice.
Okay, have a nice evening, guys, wherever you are watching this from. And Matthias, what you have any last note, encouragement?
Two last things. Listening to you, I think very interesting. Millennials who want to have all the optionality. If you are actually failing to plan, you're planning to fail. That's the thing I want to leave here. Take action, take this serious. It will open even more options if you do that one thing with money and life planning. And I like the 3F. This is really, really beautiful. Next week, we are going to have a guest here on the show that is talking about distilling skills, how to take skills apart, how to learn things quicker and faster, and how to actually empower yourself with new skills, which is also a very interesting topic. So looking forward to see you next week.
Yeah,
thank
new
you.
Skills, new income.
Yes.
And
thank you so much, Vivek, for joining.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.